I'm going to show you a brutal attacking game played in the European Team Championships in Batumi in Georgia. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. The button's down there. And if you want to support us, do check out the links. So this game is between Giri and David Anton, played in the Netherlands-Spain match. Now, Giri dipped out of the Isle of Man tournament because he wanted to protect his rating so he could qualify through to the candidates on the highest average rating. But he's back in action playing for the Dutch team in the European Team Championship. And so far, well, let's see how he's getting on. Now, he played white against David Anton, who did play in the Isle of Man tournament and played very well indeed, had an excellent tournament. And this particular line of the Gioco Piano, in fact, Anton played against Levon Aronian. They had, well, quite a dramatic game, which finally ended in a draw, but Levon tried very hard to win. So this line might be familiar to you. You might recall a dramatic game between Viswanathan Anand and Ding Liren from Norway Chess, which I covered on this channel. Do check out the link to that game, or it might be up there, it might be down there, don't know, where Anand won with a spectacular attack. And in that game, Anand played knight to f1. But here, Giri took on c6, which has also been seen before and looks very logical to simply give white a nice strong centre. Now, black does have the two bishops, and yeah, it's not so clear. And here, for example, Anand, in another game from Kolkata, played knight f1 here, and he defeated he defeated Vidit with knight f1. It's certainly not a bad move, just swinging the knight over in normal fashion. We've also seen b3 in this position has been played, also reasonable. But here, Giri, well, he didn't come to this game empty-handed, and he played a new move, a4, which has a very interesting idea. And this shows that he was in a very aggressive frame of mind. Rook to a3, with the idea eventually, if things turn out well, of swinging the rook over towards the king side. But it's not so simple to get there. So queen b7 from Anton, connecting the rooks. Of course, you would like to play knight h4 here with the idea of rook g3, but in that case that would leave the d pawn on prise. So first of all, Giri played rook e3. Well, it's not a bad square for the rook, supporting that e pawn in the middle of the board. And also it prepares b3 and bishop b2, supporting this d pawn and putting the bishop on the long diagonal. Now here, I think an interesting way for black to play is this, and then to prepare a break in the centre with d5. So this is a very typical kind of pawn sacrifice in these king's pawn openings. So you give up this pawn, and you can see that the d pawn is now exposed, and black has pressure. Not only that, black has play on the light squares with this nice bishop. But then again, you know, white has an extra pawn, and there is still some potential to attack on the king side. Now there's chances for both sides there. But instead of that, rook b8 from Anton, which is also okay, because of course there is pressure on this pawn here. bishop b2. But Giri is starting to organise himself. So he's basically his plan of a4 and switching the rook over, and then bringing out this bishop here. Well, it's been successful. So instead of having that rook on a1, it's managed to transfer itself to e3, where obviously there is far more potential for it. And this is already, I would say, quite a difficult position for black. White obviously has far more potential here. And there's no obvious plan for black, actually. Well, you could play the queen here. That's possible. And then perhaps queen c2 is possible. White has pretty decent coordination. But Anton went for it with d5. Now in this position, I don't think the pawn sacrifice is as good. But it's also interesting, actually. Also possible. Probably here we can switch the knight back to d2 to cover b3, and then this one is vulnerable. But that's also interesting. But instead the knight went back to d7. And that allowed the knight into h4. So white is getting very close to bringing the rook over to g3. And notice, black's queen is miles away from the king side. Now this is the fundamental difference between the two positions. White has excellent mobility in his lines. This queen can switch over to the king side very, very easily. This pawn center gives white this space advantage, which allows white pieces to transfer very easily, and that rook, of course, is a good example of that. So black has to react precisely here, and in fact he gets it wrong. Queen b4, attacking this pawn, but basically with the real idea of transferring the queen back to one of these squares, keeps black well and truly in the game. But instead Anton played c5, which of course fundamentally feels very sound to attack white's centre, keep white busy in the middle of the board, but in fact he's just completely misjudged it, and he doesn't have enough time to carry through this counter-attack. Rook g3, it's very simple and it's very effective. Queen h5, here we go, threatening queen takes pawn. So at the moment white has 1, 2, 3 pieces and seriously strong pieces attacking black's king. Now that's bad enough. So black guards with king h8 and bishop c1. So it's not subtle. Giri is just lining up against the king, and it's not just that the queen is miles away from the king side. This bishop as well. You feel like you need this bishop, the dark squared bishop on f8. But no, there is just no connection between king side and queen side. And this is just a case of lock and load, aim and fire, and there is no defense. You can see this one is just lined up here, and there you go. There was no defense to that, and that is basically game over. Let's just check very quickly what happens if this is taken. Well, it's not too complicated, and knight g5, and if rook here we can take, and rook takes queen f6. Well, that's just one variation, but you get the idea. It's very easy for white actually. So bishop takes pawn, just played. g6, well, that's pretty forlorn hope, but there is a very simple way of dealing with this. Knight takes pawn check. So if that's taken with a rook, then you can just play bishop takes knight, for example. Discover check, and white breaks through. Or pawn takes. Well, this is the game continuation. The queen is attacked, so the queen has to step back for a moment. White is a piece down, but it makes no difference to the result because black simply cannot connect with the king here. So there's a threat to give a discover check. And knight g5 was the last move of the game. Anton resigned here after 28 moves, but you know, considering that everything was all known up till move 13, this is not a great number of moves into the game. And there's just no defense to the bishop moving away, and then queen takes knight and checkmate. An absolute shocker. But Anish Giri is on form. So far he has 3 points out of 4 and, well, a good result on board 1, 2 draws and 2 wins. The other one was also spectacular, and at the moment, well, he's certainly not losing rating points. Thanks for watching.